The morning light over Willamette Valley spilled through gauzy curtains, soft and golden, catching dust motes that floated like shy confetti. The vineyard below was already alive with motion, white chairs in neat rows, string quartet tuning their bows, the murmur of distant guests settling in. Upstairs, in the bridal suite, Celia Dougherty stood still. The gown fit perfectly. Lace sleeves brushed her wrists, and every bead was where the designer promised it would be. Her reflection was breathtaking, but the woman staring back didn't smile. Her hand trembled as she lifted her phone again. One more check, one more hope. No message, not from her mother, not from her father, not from her brother, Marvin Dougherty Jr. A soft knock broke the silence. The door opened just enough for Martha, the wedding planner, to peek in. "It's time, Celia." Celia blinked toward the mirror. "Did my parents call?" Martha's practiced smile faltered. "Not yet, sweetheart." The air left Celia's lungs in a slow, deliberate exhale. "Then let's get this over with." Downstairs, the guests rose as the doors opened. A string version of Canon in Dut swelled through the air. For a heartbeat, Celia froze. 90 faces turned toward her. At the very front, 3 empty seats stood out like open wounds. Her father had promised to walk her down the aisle. Her mother had promised to help her choose the bouquet. Her brother had said, wouldn't miss it for the world. They all missed it. Celia took one careful step forward, clutching her bouquet of white roses. The whispers started immediately. Where's her family? Maybe they're running late. No, look at her face. Each word felt like a pin pushed into her skin. Her cheeks burned, but she didn't stop. She moved down that aisle like a soldier under fire, steady, quiet, refusing to falter. At the altar, Braylon Mora, her groom, waited. His expression was pure devotion, his eyes steady even as hers shimmered with unshed tears. When she reached him, he took her trembling hands and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "You're not alone, we're enough." The ceremony blurred. She repeated the vows she'd written on nights when she'd begged her family for approval, only to meet silence. She spoke of love, partnership, forgiveness, but inside, another vow took root. Never again would she need to beg to be seen. As Braylon kissed her, the crowd clapped. Her in-laws stood and cheered, her bridesmaids wiped tears. Yet from the corner of her eye, Celia could still see those 3 empty seats. Like tombstones. During the reception, laughter filled the garden. Toasts rang out, and champagne sparkled. Braylon's mother hugged Celia, whispering, "You're one of us now, dear." The kindness nearly broke her. Later that night, under the string lights, as Braylon twirled her across the dance floor, Celia's gaze drifted toward the dark horizon. Somewhere beyond it lay the Dougherty family estate, her childhood home. The place where her brother's high school trophies still gleamed in a glass case, while her own art awards gathered dust in a basement drawer. She remembered being 8 years old, proudly showing her parents a watercolor, painting her teacher said was museum quality. Her mother had barely glanced at it before saying, "That's lovely, honey. Now move so I can get a picture of Marvin's trophy." Her father had laughed. "Your brother's got real potential. He could be the next big attorney in Portland someday." By 16, Celia had learned that applause in that house only echoed for one name, Marvin. She swallowed the memories with a sip of champagne and turned back to her guests. Her best friend, Viviana Osborne, raised a glass. "To Celia Mora," she said, smiling at the bride. "To building the family who actually deserves you." The crowd cheered. But behind her practiced smile, Celia's heart whispered something else. If only my real family could see this. Later, when the celebration ended and the vineyard emptied, Celia stood alone beneath the twinkling lights. Her phone finally buzzed. For a heartbeat, her chest lifted then fell. It was a spam message from her internet provider. No one else had called. The night air cooled against her skin. She slipped off her heels and stared at the wedding arch where she'd spoken her vows just hours earlier. The petals had started to wilt already, fragile and soft, falling in silence. In that silence, Celia made another vow, one no officiant heard and no guest applauded. If they could overlook her on her wedding day, they would never again have the chance to define her worth. The moon rose over the valley, pale and indifferent, as the new Mrs. Mora walked barefoot through the grass, each step carrying the quiet promise of revenge, not loud, not cruel, but inevitable. The vineyards were long behind her now. Celia Mora had traded white lace and borrowed smiles for the hum of city lights. 2 years after that empty chair wedding, she sat behind a wide glass desk on the 18th floor of the Portland Creative Exchange, a skyline of steel and cloud reflected in her office window. The plaque on the door read, Celia Mora, founder and CEO, Riverlight Studios. Outside her office, her team buzzed with adrenaline. The acquisition papers had just been signed. Riverlight was now valued at $83 million, and the new partners from Seattle wanted a photo with the visionary behind the brand. Cameras flashed, champagne corks popped, and a cheer rose that shook the hallway. Celia smiled for the photos controlled, professional, but when the crowd thinned, she leaned against her desk, phone in hand. No messages. No congratulations from the Dougherty family. Her parents knew. The news had been everywhere. Business Insider, Oregon Chronicle, Tech Women Daily. She'd built an empire from nothing but neglect, and they hadn't even pretended to notice. That night, after the last guest left, Celia scrolled through social media. Her brother's page appeared first. Marvin Dougherty Jr., ESQ, partner at Dougherty and Haynes Law. Photos told a very different story. There he was in Maui, arms around his wife Rena, twin boys in matching hats. A caption read, "Family time before the next big deal." She looked closer. The oceanfront rental tagged in the post went for $5,800 a week. Another post showed a new Lexus, a caption thanking mom and dad for the early Christmas gift. And there it was, her parents' faces, smiling beside him, just as they had in every other family picture since childhood. Her stomach turned. They'd emptied half their retirement to keep him afloat. Even now, after his second firm merger had nearly failed, they were propping up his lifestyle, pretending he was the crown jewel of the Dougherty legacy. Meanwhile, their only daughter, the one who once begged them to attend her first gallery show, the one who walked alone down her wedding aisle, was invisible. Celia locked her phone and stared at her reflection in the office window. The woman looking back no longer needed applause. But deep inside, the bruise of being forgotten still ached. Mias. 2 weeks later, Celia signed for the car she'd dreamed of since college, a 2024 Porsche Taycan, metallic gray with cream leather interior. The salesman whistled as he handed her the key fob. "Hell of a machine," he said. "It's not a reward," she replied, sliding on her sunglasses. "It's a reminder." She drove through the city with the windows down, wind tangling her hair, the hum of the engine a quiet anthem of arrival. By dusk, she pulled into her driveway, took one photo of the car beneath the golden light, and posted it with a single caption, "Dreams realized." For the first time in years, her phone lit up like fireworks. Clients, colleagues, even distant acquaintances, dropping congratulatory comments. But there was one name that froze her thumb mid-scroll. Mom Dougherty, incoming call. She let it ring twice before answering. Celia speaking. Her mother's voice was brittle, overly polite. "Sweetheart, your father and I think it's time we all talked. As a family." Celia stared out the window. After 5 years of silence, "There are financial concerns. Your brother's firm hit a rough patch. We're holding a family meeting tomorrow afternoon at the house." 2 o'clock. There was movement in the background. A man's voice, curt and impatient. "Her father. Tell her it's important," he said. Her mother lowered her voice. "It's important, Celia." When the call ended, Celia remained still, the city's evening hum seeping through the glass. She knew exactly what had prompted the sudden concern. The car, the acquisition headlines, the smell of money. They'd ignored every milestone that didn't serve them. Now they wanted a seat at her table. That night, Celia sat on the balcony, laptop open, skimming through old photos of her childhood home in Lake Oswego. The manicured lawn, the cherry-red mailbox, the house that once felt like proof she belonged somewhere. She remembered her mother's favorite saying whenever Marvin won another award. "It takes the whole family to raise success." Maybe it did, but she'd raised hers alone. Before heading to bed, she opened a locked folder on her laptop labeled Riverlight Foundation. Draft bylaws filled the screen. Clauses she'd written herself, creating a trust fund dedicated to scholarships for underrepresented girls in digital media. $16 million earmarked for the next generation of forgotten daughters. Tomorrow, she thought, the family would see just how much control the invisible one had gained. She turned off the light. The Porsche gleamed in the driveway below, moonlight sliding across its polished hood like a quiet promise. The forgotten daughter was coming home, And this time she wasn't bringing flowers. She was bringing power. The Daugherty estate hadn't changed much in 10 years. The same white columns, the same hydrangeas lined up like obedient soldiers, and that same brass plaque near the door. The Daughertys, a family of excellence. Celia parked her Porsche Taycan right in front of the plaque. She didn't pull into the driveway as she used to. She wanted them to see it the moment they stepped out. When she rang the bell, her mother opened the door. Elaine Daugherty looked almost startled. Her gaze darted from Celia's tailored navy coat to the gleaming car behind her. "Well," Elaine said, voice tight but polished. "You've done well for yourself. Not how are you. Not we've missed you. Just you've done well." Apparently, Celia said, stepping inside. The scent of lavender polish and old privilege hung heavy in the air. Her father, Richard Daugherty, stood near the dining table in a pressed shirt and disappointment. Her brother Marvin lounged at the far end, a smirk on his face that hadn't aged a day. His wife Raina sat beside him, flipping through a folder. "Let's get started," Richard said, as though running a board meeting. "We appreciate you coming, Celia." "Wasn't given much choice," she replied, pulling out a chair. Marvin slid a stack of papers across the polished oak table. "Mortgage, tuition, firm costs," he said briskly. "It's been a tough year. We're a family. We help each other." Celia looked down at the papers. Loan agreements pre-signed. Her own name already typed on the lender line. She let the silence stretch until even the old grandfather clock seemed hesitant to tick. Finally, she looked up. "So this is why I was invited." Elaine folded her hands. "Sweetheart, your brother has responsibilities. 2 boys in private school. A business to maintain, and you've been blessed. We thought perhaps you could bail us out." Celia finished. Richard cleared his throat, the same authoritative sound that used to make her small. "We're not asking, Celia. We're involving you. Family means sharing the load." Celia stared at her father, at the man who hadn't walked her down the aisle because Marvin had a firm retreat. The humiliation of that day flashed like lightning. 3 empty seats. 90 guests pretending not to stare. She smiled, slowly, bitterly. "Tell me something, Dad. Where were you at my wedding?" The question landed like a stone in water. Marvin shifted in his chair. Rena glanced up, uncomfortable. Elaine's lips tightened. "You know that weekend was complicated. Your brother's firm event was more important than your daughter." Celia finished again, voice calm as ice. Her father's expression hardened. "This attitude isn't helpful." "No," Celia said, rising to her feet, "but it's honest." Marvin laughed, a sharp, condescending sound. "You've always had a flair for dramatics, Celia. Look, you've made good money. We're just saying, help out and move on. Be part of the family again. The same family that forgot I existed until I bought a Porsche," she asked quietly. That silenced him. For a moment only the grandfather clock spoke. Tick, tick, tick. Then Celia reached for her briefcase. "You know," she said, unlatching the silver clasp, "I actually came prepared to sign something today." Marvin's smugness returned. "That's my sister." Practical at last, she pulled out a crisp white envelope and slid it across the table. "It's not what you think." Richard unfolded the paper, brow furrowing. "What is this?" "It's the charter for the Riverlight Foundation," Celia said. $16 million to support young women in media and technology, girls like I used to be. The ones no one believed in. Her mother's eyes widened. 16 million, Celia. That's insane. You can't just give money away like that." "I didn't give it away," Celia replied. "I invested it in futures that won't drain me." Marvin snorted. "So you're wasting it on strangers while your own family struggles." She smiled faintly. "Strangers who'll actually show up when they're invited." The color drained from Elaine's face. Richard's jaw clenched. Marvin slammed his hand on the table. "You always needed attention. Always the victim. You're punishing us now." Celia's eyes flicked to her phone, lying beside her coffee cup. Its red light blinked faintly. "Recording." "I'm not punishing anyone," she said. "I'm documenting." "What's that supposed to mean?" Richard demanded. "Every manipulative word," she said, her tone steady. "Every guilt trip, every accusation. So that when you or your lawyer tries to come after me for family obligations, I'll have proof of what this really was." Elaine gasped. "You're recording your parents?" "I'm protecting myself," Celia said. The clock ticked on. Outside, the afternoon sun slipped lower, slicing through the blinds in cold stripes. Finally she picked up her briefcase. "You funded the golden child's life," she said softly, "until the forgotten daughter took control." And with that she walked out. As the front door closed, silence swallowed the room. Richard sank into his chair, Elaine covering her face with trembling hands. Marvin swore under his breath. Rena just stared at the envelope like it was a loaded gun. Through the window, they watched Celia cross the drive, the Porsche door lifting open like wings. When the engine roared to life, Marvin spat the words none of them would forget. "She'll regret this." But he was wrong. By the time the gate shut behind her, the forgotten daughter had finally stopped needing their permission. 3 days after the family meeting, Celia sat in her office at Riverlight Studios, sunlight glinting off her wedding ring as she scrolled through emails. Her assistant Viviana Osborne knocked lightly and stepped in holding a tablet. "You'll want to see this," she said, voice edged with tension. On the screen was a headline from Portland Chronicle Business Weekly: "Family Rift in Doherty Legacy. Tech heiress refuses to aid brother's collapse." Below it a photo of her Porsche in front of her parents' house, taken from a distance. Someone had tipped the press. Celia's stomach tightened. "He really did it," she murmured. Viviana frowned. "He gave them quotes." "Celia, your brother said, 'Some people forget where they came from once the money hits.'" The words hung like smoke. Celia took a slow sip of coffee and set the cup down. "Then we'll remind him where I came from." That afternoon, she released her own press statement, not to defend herself, but to redefine the story. It featured the Riverlight Foundation's mission, its mentorship program, and the launch event scheduled for the following week. The final line read, "This foundation is built in honor of the teachers who believed in me when others didn't." The statement exploded online. Within 24 hours, #Riverlight Scholarship was trending. Interviews were requested from Forbes Women, Tech Vision, and Oregon Today. And by Thursday, the same local reporters who'd printed her brother's accusations began to ask a different question. Why did her own parents skip her wedding? Celia didn't answer directly. She didn't need to. The truth surfaced in silence. Old classmates spoke up. Neighbors recalled how her parents always bragged about Marvin's brilliance, but never mentioned their daughter's achievements. The narrative shifted. By the end of the week, Marvin's law firm lost its largest client, a manufacturing company owned by one of Celia's investors. The optics were bad. Entitled attorney begs estranged sister for bailout. Rumors spread that his accounts were frozen, that the family's excellence was built on borrowed credit. Celia hadn't lifted a finger. She didn't need to. Humiliation worked best when it was earned. Nizas, that Friday evening, her father called. The number flashed across her phone like a ghost she didn't believe in anymore. She answered with a calm, even tone. "Hello, Dad." His voice was low, hard. "You're making us look like fools." "No, Dad," she said. "You're doing that yourself. You think money makes you better than your own family?" "No," she replied softly. "I think integrity does." Then she hung up. By Monday morning, the Doherty name was poison in social circles that once fawned over them. The country club revoked Marvin's membership after his credit line bounced. Elaine Doherty was quietly removed from the school board after whispers that tuition payments for the twins were overdue. Celia watched it unfold from a distance, not gleeful, not vindictive, just still. Viviana entered with a press packet in hand. "The Chronicle's editor wants a follow-up piece, your side of the story." Celia shook her head. "No, let silence speak." She returned to her work, reviewing scholarship applications, each one a story of a young woman overlooked, dismissed or underestimated. Girls from small towns, community colleges, broken homes. She read every word, her chest tightening with recognition. That evening, her husband Braylon Mora met her at the door of their Portland townhouse. "You look lighter," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Because I'm not fighting for their approval anymore," she said. He smiled. "You never needed it." They sat by the fire, quiet for a long while. Celia finally spoke. "They funded the golden child's life. Now they're watching the forgotten daughter take control." Braylon nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. "Feels like justice, not justice," she corrected gently. "Balance." The next morning, the official launch event for the Riverlight Foundation took place at the Portland Center for the Arts. The room glowed with candlelight, filled with investors, educators and artists. Cameras rolled as Celia walked on stage in a tailored cream suit. Her voice was steady, low and calm. I grew up believing that silence meant grace, that if I worked hard enough, eventually someone would see me. But silence doesn't protect you, it erases you. Tonight is about giving a voice to those erased. Applause thundered through the hall. As she stepped down from the stage, a reporter called out, "Mrs. Mora, what do you say to your family's recent accusations?" Celia paused, turned slightly toward the camera and said, "Family is who lifts you, not who drains you." Then she walked away. By the following week, Marvin's house went into pre-foreclosure. Elaine and Richard Daugherty withdrew from public life entirely. Their social accounts went dormant, their phone numbers disconnected. The city moved on, and so did Celia. She had no need to return calls or make statements. Her silence had done what no argument ever could. It had redefined the Daugherty name forever. And somewhere in a quiet kitchen in Lake Oswego, a once proud mother watched her daughter's foundation speech on a tablet, tears running down her face, not from pride, but from the cold realization that humiliation doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply shines. Spring came soft to Portland that year, the kind that carried the scent of wet soil and tulip petals. Riverlight Studios had expanded, 2 new floors, a media lab, and the kind of quiet prestige that couldn't be bought with inherited money. Celia Mora stood in the glass-walled conference room of the Riverlight Foundation, watching the city move beneath her. A framed newspaper hung on the wall opposite her desk. The headline read, "She turned rejection into revolution." Beneath it was a photograph, Celia surrounded by scholarship recipients. Each young woman held a camera, a paintbrush, or a pen. The image had gone viral months earlier, capturing what the public called the calm face of poetic justice. The world saw triumph. But for Celia, it was something gentler release. Near her phone buzzed. A message from Viviana. "Board meeting at 11, Maya Harrison's project review after lunch." Celia smiled faintly. Maya, 17, determined sharp as glass, was one of the first scholarship recipients. A girl from rural Idaho, who'd sold handmade jewelry to buy her first camera. Celia saw herself in her, the same flicker of brilliance that almost went unnoticed. She poured coffee into a white mug, printed with her foundation's slogan, "Family is who lifts you." Outside, the world still whispered about the Daughertys. Marvin's firm had folded, his home foreclosed, his name occasionally appeared in small columns under financial disputes. Her parents' house had been sold quietly. Neighbors said the family was downsizing. Celia hadn't spoken to them in a year, not since that final attempt at reconciliation 3 months after the scandal. That day had played out like a stage scene burned into her mind. A small cafe in downtown Portland. Her parents had arrived early, sitting together at a corner table. Richard's suit was wrinkled. Elaine's pearls hung heavy against her neck. When Celia sat down, the silence between them was almost tender. Richard had cleared his throat. "We should have been there. At your wedding. At the launch. Everywhere." Elaine's eyes filled with tears. "How can we fix this?" Celia had stirred her coffee slowly. "Some things can't be fixed. They can only be faced." Her father frowned. "We're not those people anymore." Celia met his gaze evenly. "Then prove it. Start therapy. Be accountable. Not for me, for yourselves." He'd stiffened. "Therapy isn't necessary. It's non-negotiable," she said, standing. "You taught me that control meant love, but love isn't control. I've learned that now." She left money for the check and walked out. They never called again. Now, as she reviewed applications for the next Riverlight Scholarship, Celia realized the ache that once followed her family's silence had faded. It wasn't joy that replaced it, it was peace. At noon, Maya arrived for her review session, laptop clutched against her chest. Her documentary, The Forgotten Faces of Our Town, followed 3 generations of women rebuilding their lives after being dismissed by family or circumstance. They watched the short film together in the dim projection room. The footage was raw, honest, and beautiful. When the screen went dark, Maya turned to her nervously. "Do you think it's good enough?" Celia smiled softly. "It's more than good. It's true." Maya's eyes brightened with tears. I wanted to make something that mattered." "You already did," Celia said. "And one day, you'll help someone else do the same. That's how we win, not by revenge, but by rebuilding what they tried to break." Maya threw her arms around her. Celia stiffened for a moment, then let the embrace linger. It wasn't the hug of a student. It was the embrace of the daughter Celia once wished she'd been. That evening, as the sun set over the Willamette River, Celia and Braylon hosted their annual foundation dinner at their restored farmhouse outside the city. The room was warm with laughter. Friends, colleagues, scholars, plates clinked, music played softly, and a hush settled as Celia rose to speak. When this began, she said, her voice steady, I thought revenge was power, but power fades. Purpose doesn't. Every girl we lift here tonight rewrites her story, and that's worth more than any inheritance. Applause swelled like a wave. As she sat, Braylon squeezed her hand. You did it, he whispered. Celia looked around the table, Viviana laughing with a group of interns, Maya passing dessert plates, light catching the foundation's silver crest on the wall. No empty chairs, no pity. She smiled. No, she said quietly. We did it, Maya and Russ later that night. Driving home through downtown Portland, the streets glittering with rain, Celia slowed as she passed a small coffee shop. Inside, two older figures sat at a corner table, familiar profiles framed by the window's golden glow. Her parents. Elaine looked thinner, her hands folded tightly. Richard stared out the window, eyes distant. For a moment their gazes met through the glass. Neither waved, neither smiled. Celia's heart didn't twist this time. She only nodded once, softly, the way one might acknowledge a closed chapter of an old book. Then she drove on. The city lights reflected off her windshield like a river of gold. And as she crossed the Fremont Bridge, her reflection appeared against the night sky, calm, steady, untouchable. The forgotten daughter had not just taken control, she'd rewritten the meaning of family. And for the first time her story didn't end with applause. It ended with peace.